The security camera footage showed something unusual. A man in a janitor's uniform was carefully packing leftover food into worn plastic containers, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Aurora Harvey, CEO of Future Tech, leaned closer to her computer screen. Her assistant had flagged this video with a single word in the subject line: theft. But something about the way the man moved, gentle and purposeful, made her pause. Was he actually stealing? Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Aurora had built Future Tech from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire over 15 years. She knew every corner of her building, every policy, every employee file, or so she thought. The email from her head of security had arrived at 6:47 a.m., marked urgent. She opened it while her coffee was still steaming, her penthouse office silent except for the hum of the city waking below. The video played. Camera 3, employee cafeteria, 8:15 p.m. The night shift had just changed. Kitchen staff had finished cleaning. And there he was. Andrew Ross, age 42, custodial staff, 5 years with the company, spotless record. He moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who knew the space intimately. He opened the large steel refrigerator where leftover catered meals were stored, the ones from executive lunches and company events. Food that would normally sit for a day or two before being thrown away. His hands worked quickly, transferring pasta, sandwiches, fruit, and containers of soup into a battered cooler bag. Aurora watched the timestamp. 15 minutes. He filled 3 bags. Her first instinct was to call security. Company policy was clear about taking company property. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he handled each container with care, as if the food was precious. Maybe it was the fact that he looked exhausted, shoulders bent under an invisible weight. She made a decision that surprised even herself. She would follow him. Aurora had not done field work in years. Her world was boardrooms and conference calls, mergers and market analysis. But that evening, she found herself in her car, a black sedan parked 3 spaces away from a beat-up Honda Civic in the employee lot. Andrew emerged at 9:30 p.m., right on schedule. He carried 2 large bags in the cooler. His uniform was rumpled, his gray hair visible under the fluorescent lights. He loaded everything into his trunk with the practiced efficiency of routine. Aurora followed at a distance. They drove through the business district, then into older neighborhoods, where the buildings huddled closer together and the streetlights flickered. She expected him to turn toward the residential areas. Instead, he headed downtown, toward the warehouse district. He parked near an underpass. Aurora pulled over a block away, killed her lights, and watched. What happened next made her grip the steering wheel tighter. People emerged from the shadows, not many at first. An old woman pushing a shopping cart, a young man with a backpack that had seen better days, a family, mother, and 2 children, huddled together against the evening chill. Then more. They came like water, finding its level, quiet and purposeful. Andrew opened his trunk. He began distributing the food. Aurora's throat tightened. She watched him crouch down to hand a container to a little girl, maybe 7 years old. Watched him grip the shoulder of a veteran wearing a faded jacket with military patches. Watched him laugh, actually laugh, with an elderly man who seemed to be telling a long story with animated hand gestures. This was not theft. This was something else entirely. But why had he not asked? Why had he not come through proper channels? The company had donation programs, community outreach initiatives. Aurora had signed off on them herself. She sat in her car for 20 minutes after Andrew drove away, the homeless slowly dispersing back into the night. She had more questions now than when she started, and something inside her, something that had been dormant under years of business decisions and profit margins, had woken up. However, what Aurora did not know was that Andrew's story carried a weight far heavier than she could imagine, and a reason that made every risk worth taking. Aurora did not report what she had seen. Instead, she did something she had not done in years. She looked deeper. Andrew Ross's employee file was thin, high school graduate, hired as overnight custodial staff 5 years ago. No disciplinary issues, no complaints, no commendations either. He was invisible in the way that service workers often are, present but unseen. She made calls, quiet ones. Her head of HR, casual questions about employee satisfaction and custodial. Her facilities manager, asking about supply budgets and food waste protocols. No one mentioned Andrew specifically. No one had noticed anything unusual, but Aurora had seen him, and now she could not unsee him. She followed him again the next night. Same routine, same underpass, different faces in the crowd, but the same desperate gratitude. Andrew moved among them like someone conducting a quiet symphony, making sure everyone had something, rationing carefully when supplies ran low. On the third night, Aurora made a mistake. She got out of her car. She stayed in the shadows, but she moved closer, drawn by something she could not name. She watched Andrew kneel beside a teenage boy who looked feverish and pale. Watched him feel the boy's forehead with the back of his hand, the gesture so tender it could have been a father checking on a sick child. "You need to see a doctor," Andrew said quietly. The boy shook his head. "Can't afford it. There's a free clinic on 5th Street, opens at 7. Promise me you'll go." "I don't have ID." Andrew was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. "Take the bus. Tell them Andrew sent you. Ask for Dr. Nina. She'll help." The boy took the money with shaking hands. "I'll pay you back. Just get better. That's payment enough." Aurora felt something crack inside her chest. This man, who cleaned floors and emptied trash bins, who probably made barely above minimum wage, was giving away his own money. She retreated to her car before he could see her, but the image stayed with her. That night, she could not sleep. She sat in her penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city and felt a vast distance between herself and the underpass, where Andrew had touched a sick boy's forehead. The next morning, she called a board meeting. She had an idea. A program to redistribute leftover food from the company cafeteria to local shelters. A partnership with food banks. Tax-deductible, good PR, and genuinely helpful. The board loved it. They allocated a budget, created a task force. Within a week, there were press releases and photo opportunities. Aurora felt proud. She had turned Andrew's secret mission into something official, something sustainable. She had even made sure his job was secure, quietly ensuring that no one would question the previous missing food. But when she checked the security cameras the following week, Andrew was still taking food. Why? The donation program was active. Trucks picked up the leftovers every evening. There was no need for him to continue, unless there was something she still did not understand. Aurora's next discovery came by accident. She was leaving the building late one Thursday evening when she saw Andrew in the parking lot. He was not alone. A boy stood beside his car, maybe 12 or 13, thin and quiet. He wore a school uniform that looked too big, sleeves rolled up multiple times. Andrew was crouched down, eye level with the boy, speaking softly. Aurora could not hear the words, but she saw the boy nod, saw Andrew grip his shoulder, saw something pass between them that looked like understanding. Then Andrew opened the car door, and the boy climbed inside. They drove away together. Aurora stood frozen. A son. Andrew had a son. Why had that not been in his file? Why had no one mentioned it? She went back to her office and dug deeper. Emergency contacts, benefits enrollment. There it was. Dependent. Milo Ross, age 13. Middle school records showed enrollment at Lincoln Academy across town. Attendance was perfect. Grades were average to below average. Teachers noted he was quiet, withdrawn, but never disruptive. Aurora felt pieces of a puzzle shifting, but the picture remained unclear. And the stakes, she was beginning to realize, were far more complicated than she had thought. Aurora became obsessed. She watched the footage every night, studied Andrew's patterns. He was careful, methodical. He only took food after the official donation pickup. He waited until the cameras cycled. He knew the blind spots. This was not impulsive. This was planned. She followed him for 2 more weeks. Same underpass, but she noticed something now. The people who came to Andrew were not always the same as those who visited the official shelters. Some were younger, runaways maybe. Some looked like they were actively hiding. A woman with a black eye who flinched at loud noises. A man who spoke in halting English and kept checking over his shoulder. These were people who could not or would not use the official channels. People who had fallen through the cracks so completely that even charity could not reach them. Andrew knew them all by name. He remembered who had diabetes and needed low-sugar options, who had a baby and needed formula, which he bought himself, who was allergic to dairy, who was vegetarian for religious reasons. One night, Aurora watched him sit down on the curb next to an old man who was crying. Andrew did not say much. He just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, until the man's breathing steadied. Then he handed him a sandwich and squeezed his hand, and always the boy was there. Milo sat in the car, doing homework under the dome light. Sometimes he would get out and help distribute food, but mostly he stayed close to his father, quiet and watchful. Aurora noticed how Andrew would glance back at the car every few minutes, checking, making sure his son was safe. Aurora had written checks for millions of dollars to charitable causes. She had shaken hands with senators and smiled for cameras at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. But she had never sat on a dirty curb next to someone who was crying and simply been present. And she had never brought a child into that world, teaching him through action what kindness looked like. There was something else, too. Small details that nagged at her. The way Andrew sometimes winced when he lifted heavy bags. The worn state of his car. The fact that his uniform was always clean but clearly old, mended in places. And Milo's clothes. Always clean, but never quite fitting right. Always looking like hand-me-downs or thrift store finds. She made another call to HR, more specific this time. What was Andrew's salary? The number made her pause. It was barely enough for rent in this city, let alone food, gas, and raising a teenage boy. How was he surviving? The answer came on a Thursday night. Aurora had followed Andrew as usual, but this time she stayed even after he left. She watched the underpass, trying to understand what drew him here, what kept him coming back. A police car rolled by slowly, the homeless scattered like leaves in wind, all except one, an elderly woman with a grocery cart who moved too slowly. The officer got out, started talking to her, his voice carried in the quiet night. "You can't stay here. Move along." "I'm not hurting anyone," the woman said softly. "There've been complaints. Move or I'll cite you." The woman started pushing her cart, but one wheel was broken. She struggled. The officer watched, impatient. Aurora felt anger rise in her throat. She almost got out of her car. But then another figure appeared from the shadows. Andrew, with Milo beside him. "Evening, officer," Andrew said calmly. "She's with me. We were just leaving." The officer looked skeptical, but nodded. "Make it quick." Andrew helped the woman with her cart, while Milo held a flashlight steady. They guided her gently away. Aurora followed at a distance. They walked for 6 blocks to a small apartment building that had seen better decades. Andrew and Milo helped the woman inside, carrying her cart up 3 flights of stairs together, father and son working in silent coordination. Aurora sat in her car, pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. But the full picture remained just out of reach. And what she was about to discover would shatter every assumption she had made. Aurora did something she was not proud of. She looked up Andrew's address, found his apartment building. It was in a neighborhood where rent was cheap because everything else was broken. Graffiti-covered walls. Windows had bars. The playground had a rusted swing set and broken glass. She did not go inside. She just sat in her car across the street, watching. Andrew and Milo arrived home around 11. They climbed 3 flights of exterior stairs. The light in their apartment came on. Through thin curtains, Aurora could see the shadow of a small space. One main room, maybe a tiny bedroom. Milo sat at what looked like a kitchen table, bent over books. Andrew moved around, probably making dinner. The scene was so ordinary and so heartbreaking that Aurora felt her chest tighten. This man worked full-time, risked his job to feed the homeless, and came home to a child who needed dinner and help with homework and love, and he was doing it all alone. But why? Where was Milo's mother? And why did everything about this situation feel like there was a secret Aurora had not yet uncovered? She was about to start her car and leave when another figure appeared. A young woman, maybe early 20s, walked up the stairs. She knocked on Andrew's door. He opened it, and Aurora saw his face change, saw him look back at Milo, then step outside, closing the door behind him. The conversation was tense. The woman gestured angrily. Andrew kept his voice low, his posture defensive. Then the woman pulled out her phone, showed him something. Andrew went very still. He shook his head. The woman said something sharp, turned, and left. Andrew stood on the landing for a long moment, head bowed, shoulders bent like he was carrying something unbearably heavy. Then he straightened, wiped his face, and went back inside. Through the window, Aurora saw him kneel down beside Milo, saw him put his hand on the boy's head, saw Milo lean into his father, seeking comfort even though he probably had no idea what had just happened. And Aurora realized, with sudden clarity, that whatever Andrew was protecting, it was not just about feeding the homeless. It was about keeping his son safe. And something, or someone, was threatening that safety. However, the truth that Andrew carried was far darker than Aurora could have guessed, and it was about to surface in the worst possible way. Aurora made a decision. She would talk to Andrew directly. No more watching from shadows. No more second-hand investigation. She needed to understand. She found him in the building late one evening on the 3rd floor, emptying trash bins from the development offices. He worked with quiet efficiency, earbuds in, lost in his own world. "Andrew," she said. He turned, and for the first time, she saw his face up close. There were lines etched deep around his eyes, gray in his beard, but something else too. A gentleness, a weariness that went bone deep. He pulled out his earbuds. "Ms. Harvey." Surprise flickered across his features. "Is something wrong? Can we talk? Privately." They went to a small break room on the 4th floor. Aurora closed the door. Andrew stood with his hands clasped in front of him, the posture of someone used to being in trouble. "You're not in trouble," Aurora said quickly. "I just need to understand something." He waited. "I know about the food," she said. "I've known for weeks. I followed you." Andrew's face went very still. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I thought someone might notice eventually. I'll clean out my locker tonight." "Wait, no, that's not why I'm here." Aurora sat down, gestured for him to do the same. "I'm not firing you. I just want to know why. We have a donation program now. Why are you still taking food?" Andrew was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "The program is good. It helps a lot of people. But there are some folks who can't use shelters. Undocumented immigrants who are afraid of being reported. people with mental illness, who don't do well in crowds. Kids who ran away from bad situations and don't want to be sent back. So you help them, Aurora said. Someone has to. But why you? You're barely making enough to support yourself and Milo. At the mention of his son's name, Andrew flinched. You know about Milo. I know you're raising him alone. I don't know why. Andrew took a breath, and for a moment, Aurora thought he would shut down. But then something in him broke, like a dam finally giving way. 6 years ago, I had a different life. I was an engineer, good salary, nice house in the suburbs. I had 2 children. Susan was my daughter, 14. Milo was 7. My wife was a nurse. His voice caught. Susan started hanging out with the wrong crowd, got into drugs. We tried everything. Rehab, therapy, tough love, gentle love. Nothing worked. She ran away when she was 16. Aurora's chest tightened. My wife and I, we fell apart. The fighting was constant. She blamed me for being too strict. I blamed her for being too soft. Milo watched it all. This little kid seeing his family destroyed. Andrew's hands trembled. My wife left when Susan had been gone for a year. She said she couldn't keep pretending we were a family when we were just 3 people drowning separately. Where is she now? Aurora asked. Colorado. She sends money sometimes for Milo, calls on his birthday. But she couldn't be his mother anymore. The grief was too heavy. And Susan? Andrew's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I found her 18 months ago, under a different overpass, about 5 miles from here. She overdosed 3 days before I found her. She was homeless, living on the streets, and I didn't know. I was in my house, working, taking care of Milo, and my daughter was dying alone. Tears rolled down Aurora's face before she could stop them. The people who had been with her, the other homeless kids, they told me she talked about us. Said she wanted to come home but was too ashamed. She was scared we wouldn't forgive her. She was scared Milo would hate her. Andrew looked up, met Aurora's eyes. Strangers showed my daughter more kindness in her last months than I did, because I was too busy being angry, being disappointed. I forgot to just love her. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. So I help them, Andrew continued. The people under the overpass, the ones everyone else ignores. Because maybe someone helped Susan. Maybe someone gave her a meal or a kind word. And I take Milo with me sometimes because I need him to understand that his sister wasn't a bad person. She was just lost. And maybe if he sees me helping others, he'll know that's how we honor her memory. He knows about Susan? Aurora asked. He remembers her. He was 7 when she left, 9 when she died. He cried for months. Andrew's voice cracked. Now he barely talks about her. He barely talks at all. It's like he's scared if he feels too much, he'll break like the rest of us did. Aurora could not speak. Every assumption she had made felt trivial now. I don't expect you to understand, Andrew said. And I know I broke company policy. I'll leave quietly. I'll find another job. No, Aurora said firmly. You're not going anywhere. But there was more to the story. And when the final piece fell into place, it would change everything Aurora thought she knew about sacrifice and love. Aurora went home that night and could not sleep. She sat at her computer and searched. Susan Ross, obituary, death records, and then social media. Susan's old Instagram account was still active. Aurora scrolled through photos. A smiling girl with her father and little brother at a baseball game. Susan holding a puppy while Milo laughed. Susan and Milo making silly faces at the camera. The posts stopped 3 years ago, but there were comments, recent ones. Still miss you. Hope you're at peace. Your dad and Danny came by again, left flowers. Aurora clicked through to one of the commenters, a young woman named Alicia. Her profile said she volunteered at a youth outreach center. Aurora messaged her, not sure what she was looking for, but unable to stop. Alicia responded within an hour. They talked. And what Alicia told her made everything click into place with devastating clarity. The next evening, Aurora did not follow Andrew. She waited for him in the parking lot, sitting on the hood of her car. Milo was with him, backpack slung over his shoulder, looking tired. Andrew stopped when he saw her. "Ms. Harvey." "I talked to Alicia," Aurora said, "from the youth center." Andrew went very still. Milo looked between them, confused. "She told me about the fund, the Susan Ross Memorial Fund. You set it up with what was left of your savings after you lost the house. It pays for rehab scholarships for homeless youth. No questions asked, no judgment." Andrew set down his bag slowly. "And she told me something else," Aurora continued, her voice gentle now. "About Milo's therapy bills, about how you work 2 jobs to pay for it, because insurance won't cover the kind of intensive treatment he needs for the trauma, the guilt he carries about Susan." Milo's head snapped up. "Dad?" Andrew closed his eyes. "Danny, go wait in the car." "No," Aurora said quickly. "He should hear this. He's old enough to understand." She turned to Milo. "Your father works 20 hours a day. He works here at night, then security at the youth center until dawn. He sleeps maybe 4 hours. He feeds homeless people because he's trying to make sure what happened to your sister doesn't happen to anyone else's sister. And he's breaking himself apart to pay for your therapy because he loves you more than anything in this world." Milo's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know." Andrew knelt down in front of his son. "You weren't supposed to know. You're my kid. Taking care of you is what I'm supposed to do." "But you're tired all the time," Milo whispered. "And you look sad, even when you smile." "I'm okay," Andrew said, but his voice was not convincing. "No, you're not," Milo said, and suddenly he sounded older than 13. "You're trying to save everyone because you couldn't save Susan. But Dad, I don't want you to disappear too." Andrew pulled his son into his arms, and Milo clung to him like he was afraid to let go. Aurora turned away, giving them privacy, her own tears falling freely now. After a moment, Andrew spoke, voice muffled against Milo's shoulder. "I'm scared if I stop. If I slow down, I'll have to feel everything again. And I don't know if I can survive that." "Then feel it," Aurora said, turning back. "Feel it with people who will help carry it. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Neither of you do." She looked at both of them. "I want to help, really help. Not just a program or a donation. I want to expand the Susan Ross Memorial Fund. I want to hire counselors and open a proper shelter. And I want to hire you, Andrew, to run it. A real salary, real hours, benefits that will cover Milo's therapy completely." Andrew stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because you showed me what real generosity looks like. Not money. Presence. You give people your time, your attention, your heart. That's worth more than anything I've ever created." Aurora stepped closer. "And because Milo deserves a father who's present, not just surviving, Susan would want that too." At the mention of his sister's name, Milo's breath hitched. "Do you think she knows what Dad's been doing?" Aurora smiled through her tears. "I think she knows, and I think she's proud of both of you." 3 months later, Aurora stood in front of a renovated warehouse. The sign above the door read, "Susan's Place, a safe harbor." It was not fancy. The paint was fresh but simple. The furniture was donated. But inside, there were beds, hot meals, counselors, and medical care. No judgment, no strings, no questions designed to shame. Andrew stood beside her, looking overwhelmed. Milo was on his other side, holding his father's hand. The board had voted unanimously to make Andrew the director. He had tried to refuse, said he was not qualified. Aurora had looked him in the eye and said, "You're the most qualified person I know." The opening drew a crowd, local news, city council members, donors, but also the people from the Underpass, Dorothy with her mended cart, the teenage boy Andrew had sent to Dr. Nina, Alicia and her volunteers. They came because they knew this place was real, built not from pity, but from love. Aurora gave a short speech. She talked about second chances and the power of one person choosing to care. She talked about Susan, whose legacy would now help thousands. And she talked about Andrew, though he had asked her not to make him the center of attention. Sometimes, Aurora said, the most important work happens in shadows. Someone sees a need and fills it without waiting for permission or praise. Andrew taught me that leadership is not about titles or corner offices. It's about showing up day after day for people who have been forgotten. And he's taught his son the same lesson, that we honor the ones we've lost by loving the ones who are still here. Milo stood a little straighter when she said that. When the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed, Aurora found Andrew and Milo in one of the small rooms. They were hanging a photo on the wall. Susan at a baseball game, between her father and little brother, all three of them laughing. She would have loved this, Aurora said softly. Yeah, Andrew agreed. She would have. Milo touched the edge of the frame gently. I miss her. Me too, buddy, Andrew said, pulling him close. Every single day. But I'm glad we're helping people like her, Milo added. It makes it hurt a little less. Over the following year, Susan's place became a model. Other cities reached out, wanting to replicate it. Aurora found herself in board meetings again, but this time talking about cots and counselors instead of quarterly profits. She was happier than she had been in decades. Andrew worked normal hours now. He had a team, people who shared the load. He still visited the Underpass, but now he brought information about Susan's place instead of just food. Slowly, people began to trust, began to come inside, and Milo began to heal. He still saw his therapist, but now without the crushing guilt of knowing what had cost his father. He volunteered at Susan's place on weekends, helping in the kitchen, playing cards with the younger kids who came through. He was quiet still, but there was light in his eyes again. Hope. One evening, Andrew and Milo sat together in the small apartment that they were finally able to leave behind. They were packing boxes, preparing to move into a better place in a better neighborhood. Milo held up a photo of Susan. Can we bring this? He asked. Of course, Andrew said. She comes with us everywhere. Milo nodded, then said quietly, Dad, I'm really proud of you. Andrew's throat tightened. I'm proud of you too, Danny. You've been so strong. I learned from you, Milo said simply. They packed in comfortable silence. Two people who had survived the worst and found their way back to something like peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. And that was enough for now. Aurora stopped by later to help. She had become part of their lives, this unlikely family built from shared purpose and mutual respect. She brought pizza and jokes and a lightness that reminded them both that joy was still possible. As they ate on the floor surrounded by boxes, Milo asked, Ms. Harvey, why did you help us? Aurora thought for a moment. Because your father reminded me why I started my company in the first place. Not to make money, but to solve problems, to make things better. I just forgot that the most important problems are the ones happening to real people, not abstract markets. That's a good reason, Milo said. And, Aurora added with a smile, because you both taught me that family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, especially when things are hard. Andrew reached over and squeezed her hand. Thank you. For everything. Thank you, Aurora replied, for showing me what really matters. The city kept spinning. People kept falling through cracks. But now there were more hands to catch them, more voices saying, "You matter. You are seen. You are not alone." Susan's place grew. More buildings opened. More lives were saved. And at the center of it all was a simple truth. One person, caring enough to act, can change the world. Especially when that person is teaching their child to do the same. Andrew still cleaned floors at Future Tech part-time. He said he liked the work, the quiet, the time to think. But now he left at reasonable hours, and he smiled more. And sometimes, late at night, he and Milo would sit at the piano in Susan's place and play songs Susan used to love, learning together, remembering together. Aurora would listen from the doorway, watching this father and son who had been broken and were slowly becoming whole. This unlikely partnership that had begun with security footage and suspicion and had grown into something none of them had known they needed. Years later, Milo would go to college to study social work. He would tell people that his sister saved his life, even though she never lived to see him grow up. Because her story had taught him that everyone deserves a second chance, and her memory had given him a father who chose love over bitterness. And Andrew would tell people that his son saved him. Because Milo had given him a reason to keep going when grief threatened to swallow him whole. Because loving Milo had taught him that healing does not mean forgetting. It means transforming pain into purpose. The story of Andrew, Milo, and Aurora was not about a CEO and a janitor. It was about people who had lost their way and found it again by helping others find theirs. It was about seeing the invisible, hearing the voiceless, and remembering that every person has a story worth honoring. And it was about leftovers, not just food, but people. The ones society had discarded, overlooked, deemed too broken to fix. Andrew had taught Aurora that there is no such thing as leftovers when it comes to human beings. Every person deserves a seat at the table. Every person deserves to be fed, not just with food, but with dignity, compassion, and hope. And he had taught Milo the same lesson, that the most radical thing you can do in this world is simply care, even when it costs you everything, especially then. The sun set on the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Susan's place glowed warm in the twilight. Inside, people were eating dinner, laughing, planning for tomorrow. People who had been invisible were now seen. People who had been forgotten were now remembered. And in a small office, a photo hung on the wall. Susan, Andrew, and Milo at a baseball game, frozen in a moment before tragedy struck. Below it, a plaque read, "In memory of Susan Ross, who taught us that love never ends. It just changes form." Andrew stood looking at the photo, Milo beside him. They did not speak. They did not need to. Some conversations happen in silence, in the space between heartbeats, in the shared understanding that grief and joy can exist in the same breath. And that was where healing lived. Not in forgetting, but in remembering with love instead of pain. Not in moving on, but in moving forward, carrying the ones you lost with you, letting their memory light the way for others still stumbling in the dark. The leftovers had become a feast, and everyone was invited. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone you want to hear with. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story.